Me and Sandy have both been on camera, so Sandy, just buckle up, man.
It is. Oh, hey.
Ever or like in a long time?
I think it's been. I don't think we've ever played a match together. I don't know unless you played in Classic and I was hosting, or in teams
Maybe
when I was
like
hosting. I don't
4
think
years
so.
ago. Yeah, maybe.
A long time, man.
That's what
Long
I'm talking
time.
about.
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, I've seen like your stuff, but like,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
He's a legend. All right, everybody. Henry Confidential here. This is 3 and Out on There'll Be Movies. This is our episode 2. And unfortunately, the original plan was to talk about horror sequels, but I wasn't aware because I watched the first episode, I logged it, and I saw that they were talking about that, so I didn't realize that they were going to cover horror sequels in episode 2. So once I saw that their episode this Tuesday that I watched, which was a great show by the way, I realized, hey, we can't do horror sequels because it's going to be repetitive. So I reached out to Sandy, Aaron, and Madi, and I said, let's talk about thirds in franchises, because I still wanted to be relevant to Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, which is in fact the third of the series. So that's exactly what we have today. We have thirds in franchises, which is also fun because it's 3 and Out. So we're gonna get right into it, and I will say the panel knows this, but we have limited it to 5 honorable mentions because, sorry Jen, you ruined it for everybody. So, and give a little recap of what we're doing is we set a topic, which is in fact this week, third installments in franchises, and you get to pick one favorite, one underrated, and one most rewatchable. And I actually did a favor for the panel, and I gave them a heads up on what was picked. So if somebody submitted a movie that was popular, I was like, hey, you can talk about this and be a little repetitive to them if you're not 100% passionate and die hard about it, no pun intended, or you can choose something else if you want to show it a little love. So luckily we have 12 different movies on our main show, and the honorable mentions might overlap. So with that being said, Sandy, real quick, are you ready to have some fun, talk about third installments and franchises, or you just gonna not give a shit?
Listen, I'm going to have some fun. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, who gives a shit what I think is a good third movie? But you know what? It's going to be a fun time. I've argued with Aaron before, and this is good. I don't think I've ever argued with Madi, but you know what? I love both of them. And
we're about to.
We're about to. There's going to be no question that this is how it is. So hooray! Yay!
Speaking of no questions, Speaking of no questions, this is not a trivia show, so there will be no questions. There will be just answers. What our picks are for these third installments. And Aaron, you watched the first episode, and we were on your TMG After Dark a couple weeks ago, so we have a lot of history, both in the back of the day, but also pretty recently. What are your thoughts on this show, and what are your thoughts on the topic today?
I think it's nice that you invited me into heaven with that background. I don't know how else any of us are getting there, but it's nice of you to do so.
Oh, it's very ironic with this panel.
Ever.
No, I just think in the spirit of being unique, I think we really missed the chance to talk about second films in a franchise in honor of Spirit Untamed, a movie that everybody is excited for, right?
Let me change the background real quick. Sorry, too late. So I guess we're stuck. And then Madi, we all know that if we're desperate and we need a fourth panelist, we'll give you a call, and that's what happened today. What are your thoughts?
I'm just here so I don't get fined. I don't know. I just kind of picked 3 movies, and then Jen, I gotta call you out right now. I had I don't know how many honorable mentions I had, but Henry, this I'm not gonna swear. I'm gonna try not to swear because they just said let's be respectful, professional. Henry was just like, oh, limited to 5 honorable mentions. So I was like, 5 per category. That's how I'm going to get away with it.
Is that why you had to specify? Okay.
He had to specify because of me.
We had a Gen rule. You have to get 5 honorable mentions. Now we have a Madi rule. 5 total, not 5 per category.
I had a whole long list. I was like, if Jen can do it, I can do it. I had a whole long list of movies I wanted to mention. And Henry's like, nah, cut it to 5. And I was like, God.
At least you're not like Aaron. He was like, well, I also have one from this part of this franchise, but technically could go here and here and here. He had subgenres within subgenres. He had a lot of Inception picks based on this. And I was like, whoa, I'm going to need you to calm this down and pick one, buddy.
You know what?
I'll explain myself.
Aaron is younger than me, but apparently he's also smarter than me in that case, because I just picked 3 movies that were just like, oh, that's the third one in this franchise, right? And then I just went with that. So it's going to be great being the
I love
dumbest
if
guy on
one of
this
these is
panel
wrong.
again.
Can I just say I'd love more than anything if one of his gung-ho picks was actually not a third entry. That'd be
I really hope they're all the third entry, but
Spoiler
you know what?
alert.
At this point,
Spoiler alert, he
I don't
just picked
think
3
Henry
movies
can
with
check.
3 in the title, and he was like, I'm sure this is right. 300,
Three
Three Amigos. That
3,
3 Amigos, 300.
and 3 ninjas. He's like,
ninjas. Yeah,
he's like, in
that's-
fact, I haven't seen 1 and 2 ninjas, but 3 ninjas is fire, and it's on the list.
It's like History of the World Part 2. Like there's a Part 1 somewhere, just no one's ever seen it.
Well, we're going to go ahead and get started with this show. And Sandy, I'm going to let you kick it off and tell us what your favorite third installment is.
All right, this is where it starts, boys. You guys are going to come at me right off the bat, but my favorite third movie in a franchise is my second favorite movie in this entire franchise. And it's in my top 10 period. It is episode 3, Revenge
Oh, get the
of
fuck
the
outta here.
Sith. Here it comes. Here it comes.
Sorry.
Yes.
I'm being professional. I'm sorry. But get out of
Revenge
here.
of
Fuck
the
it,
Sith
fuck it. We
is
broke
my
the language
favorite third.
barrier. We're not going to the kiddies anymore. We're not getting the Play-Doh ads, all right? So
Nope.
Henry, I know you're
That
monetizing
is
all, but
mine.
this is too much.
This is actually on
sorry.
the live channel, so this is technically gung
Oh,
ho
good.
available. So,
Woo!
but with
Yeah,
that said,
he wouldn't-
Wow.
he
hold
wouldn't,
on.
He wouldn't chance a check with you on the show, Madi. Between
was-
me and you, that's not
that-
happening.
Yeah. But hold on.
I
Let's
was
hold
looking
on,
at- that's 6
Madi.
minutes.
Madi,
I
let's
lasted
give
6
Sandy
minutes.
his chance. Let's give Sandy his chance to explain why he chose this, and then depending on the vibe of the show, because the show's not meant to be a back and forth, but based on this panel, I might allow it today. But Sandy, go ahead and explain yourself on why this is your favorite, not underrated, rewatchable, or honorable mention. Why it's your favorite.
Okay, so everybody knows that I'm a Star Trek fan. I'm also a huge Star Wars fan, probably more of a Star Wars fan than I am Star Trek. Just Star Wars is impossible in trivia nowadays because, seriously, you know, what color was R2's third wheel in the second scene of 4? It ain't going to happen anymore. So
Rust-Oleum? I don't know.
Exactly. Exactly. I loved this entire trilogy. Attack of the Clones, I give a little bit of a pass on just because it's ugly in some places.
You
But-
should.
I loved this final chapter into it. One of my favorite characters in movies is Darth Vader. I love Anakin's story from the beginning right to the end of when he turns and then turns back at the end of the whole franchise. It's got one of the best lightsaber duels, bar none, in all of Star Wars. Including some of the really awesome animated stuff in Clone Wars and Rebels. But what really makes this movie really, really great isn't Anakin's journey. It's not anything other than that. It's watching the Emperor. It's watching Palpatine, his final plan, completely take over the universe. And no, that's great. Bastard. You know, it's exactly, but in that moment, there's something special. If you leave the no out of it and you look at Palpatine specifically, his little evil smile, because now he knows he owns Anakin. Nowhere else he can go. He's already done the worst shit possible. So. Being that that's why I give a lot of people crap for not liking episode 1, because episode 1 is so political and so awesome about how it is, and it sets the whole thing up right from Jar Jar to everybody. Jar Jar plays a big part in Attack of the Clones, which is why I don't hate it completely. And it all leads into episode 3. It ends exactly how you want it to. The birth of Luke and Leia, getting split up, Darth Vader standing, you know, Tarkin's there talking to the Emperor, and as soon as Vader steps up, Tarkin goes, okay, I'm out of here. And, you know, they just stand there on the, you know, on the bridge of the ship looking at the construction of the first Death Star. it can't end any more perfectly than that, especially when you are looking at A New Hope and the original trilogy. You slot Rogue One in there, and it is the perfect transition from the prequels right to the end of Return of the Jedi. So yeah, Star Wars: Revenge of the Sith. Say what you want about it. It is my favorite third movie in the franchise.
All right, so in case you aren't familiar with how we're trying to establish the show, it's not meant to be a bunch of back and forth. But Madi, I know you have a few things you want to say, so I'm gonna give you 1 minute if you want to say. If you're good, okay, we're gonna leave it at that. I do have
The
one
last
question.
20 minutes are good. I'll say the last 20 minutes are good, but the rest of the movie I definitely had a lot of problems with. Also, you went from Star Wars and you picked Revenge of the Sith, not even Return of the Jedi, which is a better movie. Even though I know it's technically episode 6, but it's like the third one that came out. So I don't really know what to think of you, Sandy. I had a lot of respect for you up until about 7 minutes ago, and now I'm just questioning a lot of my life choices.
I'm just glad it's
all right.
not Rise of Skywalker. It could have been worse, man.
Oh my. We'll save that for later. So
I like Rise of Skywalker.
I like
it-
Rise of Skywalker too.
it might be an honorable mention. We'll figure it out. Aaron, what is your favorite today?
So I'm going to preface this with the same thing that I kind of said to you before earlier. Obviously, I feel like if I had just gone at it straightforward, I could have picked like the most generic, not most generic, that sounds bad, but like the most obvious picks, right? So I decided to put a limiter on myself, which is if it's in a trilogy, it has to be my favorite, or if it's in a larger franchise, it has to be at least in like my top 2. And so that's why stuff like Return of the Jedi wasn't one of my picks, simply because it's not my favorite of the trilogy. It's not one of my top 2 in that larger franchise, right? So with that in mind, my best third film in a franchise is Logan. It is easily the best of the 3. It is easily the best of the 3 Wolverine films. I mean, 1.5 of them aren't even good. Like, I'd say half of Wolverine's good, and X-Men Origins is just fucking atrocious. If we're comparing it to the other third films in the X-Men franchise, it's better than Last Stand, and it's way better than Apocalypse. So there's no competition. I'd argue it's the best film in the whole franchise. It's one of my favorite films of the last 10 years.
I agree on that.
It's one of the few X-Men films that brings pure, unkempt emotion. Like, the performances in this film from every character that need it are so raw and so giving. And the biggest compliment I can pay this film is, I think going into it subconsciously, we all expected Wolverine to die or go out in some way. What was even more emotional was the death of Professor X and his final monologue and how they handled all of that. If you haven't seen this film, spoiler, by the way, but it, like, just the handling of that, I mean, straight up, like, we're in an era where superhero films, more than ever, we're starting to see more and more where there's a legitimate argument for like Oscar caliber stuff. This movie did get a screenplay nomination, and I think that was well deserved, but I legitimately believe Patrick Stewart was snubbed for a best supporting actor nomination, at least a nomination. I just think it's one of the best acted films. It's one of the best directed films. It's one of the best written superhero films ever. And like I said, since I started reviewing films in 2014, I keep a track of like my top 100 from 2014 on, just since I've started actively watching and reviewing films. Out of the last 7 years of film, this is number 3. It is that truly incredible, and it was the first movie that came to my mind when I thought best.
All right, so I'm gonna give Madi a second just because it looks like he just genuinely didn't think of it in terms of the criteria. So I'll give you a 1 minute, like, what, since this potentially could have been a favorite, we'll get into your favorite in a second. Would this have been your favorite? And if not, like, what is a quick thought on it?
I don't know if I would have put it as my favorite. I completely forgot that the Wolverine trilogy was like a separate trilogy. I just kind of thought, oh, X-Men. Oh, it was X-Men 3. I'm not taking that.
Yeah.
But like, this movie was just so good, man. And I agree with everything Aaron said. I mean, it's such a brilliantly made movie. I thought Patrick Stewart definitely deserved a nomination. I thought Daphne, what's her name? Daphne Keane was absolutely brilliant, and the whole like Disney Fox thing of like how they shifted it is the reason we don't have like a spin-off movie of her already, which would have been something I would have loved to have seen. But it's just top to bottom, it's so good. It's probably my second favorite like comic book movie ever. just slightly behind Dark Knight, but it's such a great movie. Like I'm mad at myself for not thinking of it. It wouldn't be
Well,
my favorite, but
well, now you can perfect segue. What is in fact going to be your favorite pick today?
Well, I went with one that I don't remember what show it was that we talked about this. I know we've talked about it, but Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King was my pick. I look, I was how old was I? I was like 9 when this movie came out in theaters, maybe something like that. And I still remember going to the theater with my dad and my brother to go see it. It was such a visceral experience for me the first time I saw it, and I almost put it as rewatchable, and I switched the two around, but because of the length of it, it's loses a little marks on the rewatchable side. But it's such a brilliantly made movie. It ends the trilogy that Peter Jackson did so well. Yeah, it has like 27,000 endings at the end, but like it's such like it's storytelling to me at its finest. You go to New Zealand, you film these movies all in sequence, and you put them out, and you have the theatrical versions that are widely accepted as like brilliant pieces of filmmaking. We haven't really had anything in the fantasy genre since then that's been that good. I mean, the Hobbit's movies were fine, but like other than
Aragon's a
like
classic.
a couple, Aragon is a brilliant, 27 Oscar-winning movie, but like it kind of it stood the test of time. I did a rewatch a few weeks ago, and it's still just as brilliant as it was like in the early 2000s when it came out. And also, like when you think about the fact, he did his own extended edition, and it adds to the story so much more that you're like, this movie is as close to being perfect, and the trilogy in itself is as close to being perfect as you can make it. And it's such a testament to what Peter Jackson did and what the cast did and what the crew did and all the hours that they put, the years of work that they put in. It's for me as close to like a perfect ending of a trilogy that you can get.
That's what I'm talking about, and that it's arguably like if you did this list and you asked 100 people, I would say 70, 80 people are probably having this in one of these 3 slots.
It's definitely it's definitely an easy definitely an easy choice, but like there's a reason it's an easy choice.
Sometimes there's an easy. I mean, that just like me last week on 3 and Out for the topic we did, which I'm blanking right now. Single locations. When I did 12 Angry Men, I'm like, I couldn't not do 12 Angry Men.
Yeah, it's
you know what I mean?
Choice.
Like, there's some where you want to think outside the box, and we're gonna get into some of that in a little bit. Don't worry, but that's why I love this show. It's favorite for a reason, and shout out to that. So we're gonna go to mine, and I'm gonna talk about my favorites of these movies, and I will preface this. There are a couple that I like more, like my actual favorites, but they're being brought up today, and I'm leaving at that. And one of them has a weird sub thing where I'm like, technically it's the third, but also it's not, and we'll get into that later. I actually bring it up in my honorable mentions. So with that being said, the reason that this one is my favorite, it's because out of all of these, even the honorable mentions that I'm going to talk about, I've liked this the longest because I love this film, and I get maybe 1 or 2 of the criticisms, but I genuinely don't understand the hate for the movie. I honestly think it's because of how it followed number 2, that the praise with the hype was just so high that because it's not quite onto that level, which technically I like the second one more now, but at the time, for a while, I liked this third one more. So the fact that it even had a little bit more than that shows of how much I love this movie. And the only reason I'm being vague to start off with is because I know your guys' reactions initially, and you guys are going to hear me out. But my favorites is The Dark Knight Rises. I love this movie.
Oh, wow.
So much.
Okay. All right. I actually thought that you were going to go into this trilogy, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I love this. Everyone knows me. I'm a Nolan fanboy, but honestly, this has nothing to do specifically with Nolan. The 2 criticisms I understand are the action scenes, which is also brought up in The Dark Knight, and the other one I don't understand, and then the fact that it's just not quite The Dark Knight. That's fine, but everyone has an issue with him not being Batman for most of the movie. But guess what? Those same people praise Batman Begins for the high quality Bruce Wayne buildup. So I just don't understand the double standard for that, because who cares? It's a great movie in of itself. And yes, it's a little long, but it earns its runtime. I don't really feel anything within this movie that could be taken out and not affect the overall impact of the movie. I love everything to do. Tom Hardy's Bane is fantastic. I love Anne Hathaway's Catwoman. Yes, is it the same exact as Michelle Pfeiffer's? No, but it's not meant to be. It's a different world. It's a different build-up. I love everything that they do in this movie. And Christian Bale, other than his little eye booger, everything about him as Batman is fantastic. You know what I mean? Like, he's great. He does a fantastic job. He broke his back, but he built it up. You know what I mean? He worked out. He's also Batman. It's one of those things where it's a lore of what you're building with this character of it. And also, for the record, did he technically break his back? I don't know. He didn't see an actual doctor. He tore real ligaments in his knee, or he had no ligaments in his knee. We can talk about that, but he also had the brace that, you know, is Batman-worthy technology. So that's in of itself. But the actual back part, it's never officially stated that he's broken his back. It's kind of a, you know, an exaggeration of, I broke the bat. So it's okay if he, you know, climbs a few things with a broken back. But anyway, the one issue that a lot of people have with this movie is the fact that, oh, he walked out of there and he got back to Gotham. He figured out a way. That's, you know, are we going to make this movie 3.5 hours because he actually, you know, took an Uber to get back to Gotham? No, we're going to he gets back and it's in enough time. You know what I mean? Like, relax. How many movies do you see where that really doesn't affect the overall story? Okay, Aaron, sure. If you have something important to say on this topic, I will allow it, because maybe I'll say you're right. So go ahead. And if it's wrong, I'm going to hate you.
No, just a curiosity question.
Okay.
What does the price look like on an Uber from what looks like the Middle East back to Gotham? Like, what are we talking? 'Cause that's like boat transport and like, that's all. No, I'm fucking with you.
I don't know.
Honestly,
how much would it cost?
I think he took an Uber pool for sure. An Uber pool for
Uber
sure.
pool?
Like he
Uber pool? Yeah,
he had a couple other people in there. You know,
I mean,
you got to say.
I love how Henry said, you know, I'm going to let you have, you know, this time, Aaron, if you have something really, really important to say about this topic, and it just disintegrated.
Yeah.
Like,
hold on. To add something to the conversation, what I will say is, even though it's my personal least favorite of the trilogy, I'm actually the inverse. I think Batman Begins is the best of the three, but it's a case of like, we're talking like 9.5, 9, 8.5. Like, they are all fucking damn close to each other.
Yes, and then that's fine with me. Like, even me with Batman Begins, it's the only one of the three that's not in contention for like my top 100. And it's not like I dislike Batman Begins by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just one that, like, it just misses the mark for me. But that doesn't mean it's a bad movie, you know what I mean? So you're allowed to, like, for example, Nolan films even. Like,
I don't get the hate. He's got worse films. He's got worse films.
I don't know about worse films.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, that's not in of this conversation. So with that said,
Interstellar is worse.
Yeah, okay, you are.
Tenet.
Oh, I like Tenet.
Can hold on? No, we're not going there. We are not going there. So you guys ruined my day. Don't ever talk bad about Interstellar again.
I never said he's got bad films. I just said it's worse.
Don't ever say anything bad about Interstellar again. Sandy,
it's
please.
Like 4 stars and up.
I just want to make one tiny comment about that. The only reason that Batman, The Dark Knight Rises, isn't one of my favorite threes is because I wish they would have taken the mechanics of Bane in Batman and Robin and Tom Hardy's performance of Bane and put them together, because the fact that he wasn't injecting himself with venom to make himself strong and big to beat up Batman bugged the piss out of me, because it's Bane.
He also didn't have but Batman also didn't have a back credit card. Sandy, what is your most rewatchable third installment in a franchise?
He probably did. Let's be real. He just didn't flash it.
That's probably how he paid for his Uber, if we're really being honest here.
I'm not saying that.
Stick it on the card.
Mystery
We'll deal with that later.
Mystery solved.
Sandy, what is your most rewatchable?
Okay, so I sort of juggled my two, as Henry knows, a couple of times. With
hopefully the graphics right, because at this point
I'm hoping so too. But my most rewatchable third movie, and literally when I say rewatchable, I watch this probably 3 to 5 times a year. I can literally quote anything on it. Is Army of Darkness. It is the third movie in the Evil Dead trilogy. And I don't care what anybody says. The first one, straight up horror movie. It's a straight up horror movie, and I can accept it for what it is. Scared the crap out of me, but I'm a real bad horror person. So it's People love it, and it's fantastic. Where this franchise really took off for me was in Evil Dead 2. It turned from a horror movie into a horror comedy, and the only person that could pull this off is Bruce Campbell. I don't have a hand anymore. It's turned alive, and it's running around and screwing with me. So what am I going to do? I'm going to stick a chainsaw on it and start whacking things out. It's so funny. His facial expressions are so funny that once you move into Army of Darkness, you have a pattern already. And what he does in the past, all I care about is that if you guys go back and watch the Necronomicon part where he's trying to say the words, and it's Batum, Naratum, and he does that like 3 or 4 times, and it's absolutely hilarious to watch him do this. The way the old people interact with the old timing people, not old people, but the old timing people react to Ash is great. And it even ends on a really great note too. So this for me is my most watchable third movie in a franchise. If you haven't seen it yet, please go check it out. It is worth the watch.
Yeah, and once again, this show's not meant to be a complete back and forth, but I want to give a shout out to this. I despise Evil Dead 2, and I know I'm in the minority.
Wow.
I love Evil Dead 1, and I really like Army of Darkness, and I despise Evil Dead 2. Trust me, it makes no sense, because I also love Ash vs. Evil Dead. I've given it a second chance, and I was like, maybe I just wasn't in the right mood. I don't get why Evil Dead 2's a classic and revered, even if it's a cult classic. That's not the conversation. The point is the fact that I disliked Evil Dead 2 as much as I did, and I really, really, really enjoy Army of Darkness. The first time I watched it with Mike, and he was like, this movie's fucking awesome, and we watched it together on a Skype call or whatever, and I was like, this movie is awesome. You know what I mean? And it hasn't held up on rewatches. It's definitely one where I feel like I have to be with my buddies to watch it who love it as much. Whereas Evil Dead 1, that's why it's my favorite of the 3, because I feel like I can watch it alone. But the point is, if someone who doesn't like horror or doesn't like goofy horror comedies or whatever, I think this holds up for everything. You know what I mean? It's got a little bit of everything in these genres, and it's a great choice. So I understand why it's rewatchable. Aaron. What is your most rewatchable?
So it's kind of funny that this is the one I went with for rewatchable. Once I got my list together and I thought about what I wanted to put forward, because it's probably the most recent of all the films I suggested. But I picked it because in terms of just when it was in theaters, I saw it 4 or 5 times in theaters, which is a lot for me to see something. And I just think it's just a fucking theme park ride of a film, if we're going to quote Martin Scorsese. I went with John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum. This franchise is like a never-ending roller coaster build. Like, I'm just waiting for the movie where they finally decide to send you on the loop-de-loop. Because this is just, think about it. As a trilogy, this takes place over the course of, 3 or 4 days, technically? But it feels like a lifetime because of everything that they do. And this, to me, is the best. I think, I believe his name is Mark Damascus, but I'm not 100% sure. Essentially, the Common replacement for this film, he's playing the same role Common kind of did in the second film of, I'm the main guy that's going against you. He is endlessly endearing, especially with the kind of fanboyism aspect added to it of when you get those quiet moments, they flip out, him and Common having a friendly drink for, I'm actually a really huge fan of yours. I really like the way that you do this or that. And it's that's funny. Everything down to instead of it just being a mass, the first one had a huge car chase. The second one was the fight through the museum. But this one, where they invade the Continental, and it's basically Lance Henriksen and Keanu Reeves just standing off in the Continental, is incredible. And what I love about it is it's all the little details in it that make it incredible. Like the fact that these two are just going ham. You forget till you pay attention. They have their own team of soldiers who fucking suck. These guys get shot up like it's nothing.
Stormtroopers.
I was just saying,
really,
Stormtrooper effect.
Yeah, it's just them two. And then obviously, the best part of this film is its use of animals, truly.
Horses.
John Wick
Oh, yeah.
uses a horse to kill people by spanking its ass, and Halle Berry with the dogs that love going for the nut shot. Like, just
It's-
That's
and
the
they're
most.
there on the
That is the
poster. I'm
most
glad.
rewatchable scene in the entire franchise for
Oh,
me. Is
dude,
that dogfight?
It's so incredible, man. I
That-
remember the first time I saw this movie, it was after I'd just done like an 8-hour stock shift, so I was tired of shit. I was like half zoned out watching it, but still loving it. And as soon as I saw those dogs start chomping, I was like, "Oh fuck, I'm awake now. What is happening here?" Because it's just it's the most creative is the best way I can put it. For the first two films, while endlessly entertaining, kind of had the same feel in terms of how they were escalating the action. It was just the second one had more death in it. Whereas with this one, it was how creative can we get? Instead of like just constant gun fu, let's do a knife fight, let's do a fist fight, let's use animals, let's do a standoff barrage with an unlimited arsenal of weapons and Ian McShane mugging for the camera endlessly. It was just what can we do to make this more interesting? All of it, man. I could go on. It's just that much fun that like every time you come back to it, even though you know what's gonna happen, it's still fun as shit.
Yeah, John Wick. The John Wick franchise is similar to how the Mission Impossible franchise has just reinvented itself and really stood out for the 2010s. It's one of those things where I'm like, I'm not as ironic as it is, just based on my personality and as like open-minded and like, you know, genuinely like tough I try to pretend to be. I don't really enjoy action movies as much as you would assume that I would, just generally speaking based on my persona. But like, this is one of those movies where like it really stands out amongst, you know, the generic. And granted, it's not my favorite, it's not my most rewatchable, it's none of that stuff, but I give it its praise, and I have no arguments. Like, if someone had this in their top 100, I wouldn't judge them by any means, because I get it. This movie is fantastic, the franchise is fantastic, and it's so cool. Sandy, similar. Okay, go ahead real quick.
Well, no. I was gonna say, considering my list is of like just the last 7 years of film, the first one isn't. It's just out of it, but the second and third one are in my top 100 of like 7 years of film. Yeah, they're awesome. Incredible.
And Sandy, similar to what I did with Madi for Logan, I saw your reaction of how you potentially forgot it. So give a quick little oh shit moment.
I'm so pissed off at myself that I didn't even put this down in my honorable mentions. This absolutely crushes my heart. I love this trilogy. Doesn't matter. When I watch the first one, I skip through the first 15 minutes and then I start watching it. I won't watch it ever. I can't take it again. But the way Aaron is absolutely right. The way they treat animals, even that scene. The animal just like getting, coming to him. Yeah. He's busted up too, and it is so great. And Parabellum is one of, if not the best entry into this one. I'm so annoyed. It is such a good franchise, and this is such a good movie. You're right about Ian McShane. He's just mugging it up the whole time. I love how he just sits in the room with all the weapons, and he's just having tea and, a little crumpet and a little whatever. And they just keep on coming in. Okay, that didn't frickin' work. And where's the rest of our stormtrooper dummies that are getting shot up all over the place? All right, we need something bigger. It's so good. Yeah, I'm with you on this one, and I'm sick to my stomach that I missed it. So.
Well, hopefully Madi follows up with potentially another forgotten gem. Madi, what is your most rewatchable third entry in a franchise?
I just want to shout out Jen again, because both of those movies would have been on my honorable mentions had I been allowed to have them. But unfortunately, they weren't. They were this close, honestly, both of them. And good on you, Sandy, for putting a horror movie on there. I know that's difficult for you. My third, or my most rewatchable movie is another, like, all-time classic. It's, as of yet, the final movie of that trilogy, but they're making another one. And it's a movie that I kind of grew up on as well. My grandfather is very similar to one of the main characters in the movie, so I have a pretty emotional connection to it. It's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Yeah, I mean,
let me put it this way: Madi's the one who got dibs this episode. We'll throw that out there. Go ahead.
I did get. As soon as he messaged me, I was like, I'm putting those two on for sure. It doesn't matter which order yet.
He replied first, and he got dibs. Go ahead.
I got dibs, so I got the best results. No, I mean, everything about this movie is to me, it's the best Indiana Jones movie of the three. Sean Connery adds so much that we didn't know we needed into this franchise. I love Temple of Doom for what it is. I really enjoy Raiders, but him being like, oh, I was basically your character like 30 years ago. Now you're just kind of coming up to where I was. It's such a brilliant like father son dynamic because there's no one else who could have pulled it off. Like no one else who could play Harrison Ford's father, like someone who is definitely someone who womanizes, someone who is extremely intelligent, who knows what they're doing, and then you're like, well, it's Harrison Ford, so we got to go with like the one person who's more iconic throughout cinema history, and that's James Bond. So we get him to play your father, and he's done everything you've done, but he's done it better, and he did it 30 years ago. Like, there's so much of this movie that I love, and for some reason he's Scottish. But it's such a brilliant take on just the father-son dynamic, as well as such an amazing Indiana Jones movie. And the ending always gets me as well, because it's the entire time is just about them kind of rekindling a relationship more than them finding the Holy Grail. Like the Holy Grail is almost like a side quest for him at this point, where it's just like, all right, we got to get ourselves back together. And when he finally says Indiana, let go at the end, every single time I burst into tears. Not even like gonna like try and hold back. It's such a wonderful moment. I also want to shout out the moment where they both know that she talks in her sleep, which is just an absolutely. I watched that with my grandfather, and he's like, "Don't you say a damn word." And I'm like, "That's all. That's all I have to hear. That's all I have to hear." Because I'm telling you, my mom sees it, my dad sees it, everyone in my family's like, basically, Sean Connery in Indiana Jones is like your grandfather, right? And like, except a little bit less intense in certain moments, but like there's a
Less
huge
Scottish.
similarity. So every time. He's British, so he's close, but
okay.
not quite.
There we go.
Yeah, but it's like every time I see it, I'm just like, this is so weird to watch my grandfather on screen, but a little bit whiter. But it's just, for me, that's why it's going to be rewatchable to the end of time. It'll be basically like I'm spending time with my family. So it's also a great movie on its own right, but it's got that personal effect for me.
And since I knew that this was on both your honorable mentions initially, I'll go ahead and give you guys both about a minute to talk about why you unfortunately were forced to not pick it. Aaron, go ahead. Why does this movie touch you deeply, and which of the three would it have been if you would have classified it?
I probably would have put it under rewatchable as well, because I think it's the one of the films that I've seen the most. It is my favorite of the franchise. And Henry can say this. I only had a list of like 11 entries total, so I just sent everything. I put this under honorable mentions right away because I was like, somebody else is bound to have it, so let me kind of come up with something else. But yeah, it's an incredible film. You're right. I'll say 3 1/4 of the Indiana Jones films are really, really good.
There's only 3.
There's only 3.
Fair enough.
They're working on the 4th one, but there's only 3.
Oh, true. I'm looking forward to that from the director of Logan. No, all 3 of these films are incredible. For me, at least, Temple of Doom is like a score or 2 below 1 and 3. But they're all incredible. But the one thing that these films consistently nail is chemistry amongst cast. Like whoever's on the adventure, they always have incredible chemistry. But this is the ultimate combo. I mean, it says a lot when like one of my few issues with the film is kind of something you poked fun at. River Phoenix and Harrison Ford don't even speak the same. I don't know how one could become the other, and neither are Scottish. But if nitpicking's the best I got to criticize this film, then fuck it, man. It's just a fun adventure film. This is the pinnacle of it, man.
Exactly. Bruce Wayne can get to Gotham however the hell he wants, and Harrison Ford doesn't need to be Scottish. Sandy, real quick, which of the 3 would you have classified this, and how does this affect you deeply?
Okay, so this is my first of the whole trilogy, and it was on my honorable mentions only because I knew it was going to be somebody else's for sure, because it's just
imagine if we'd all done that.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's like, honorable mention because someone else is going to take it.
This movie means a lot to me just because of the father-son relationship. I like all of the instances where they interact with one another right off the bat. Junior, and he's like, Dad, and he, they just they they complement each other so perfectly throughout the entire movie that everything else sort of just like melts away, and you're just focused on where they're going as a duo, and then it opens up into this big huge world, and you're just like, oh, okay, I love this movie so bad. So yeah, it's iconic. Who else are you gonna put as Harrison Ford's dad? Like, you can't. You cannot pick anybody else, because at his essence, that's who Indiana is. He's a fly by night kind of guy. Well, guess what? So's his dad. So, and he's, like you said, did it before and longer. So it's such a great movie. I watch this movie as many times.
There you go. Fun fact: I haven't seen it.
Get the fuck out of here.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
You've just been canceled again.
I'll give two. Lucky number 3. No, I'll give 2 sentences why. One, I tried to watch it when I was like streaming movies illegally, just because I was trying to watch as many as possible, and I just couldn't get a good copy, and it just kept lagging out. So the little bit I did see, I don't remember any of it because it just didn't connect. And then 2, even though I do admit it's a good movie, I think Raiders is one of the most overrated movies of all time. So I've just never had the desire to go and watch 2 or 3. So it's just, I don't, once again,
wow.
I don't hate Raiders, but I genuinely think it's one of the most overrated movies of all time. So I just haven't.
Agree partially.
If you're
I
a horror
partially
guy,
agree
you
with you.
might actually like 2 better, because 2 gets real dark.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm based on.
Yeah, he gets pretty dark.
Yeah. The crazy weird things I like, as long as it holds up in terms of just entertainment wise, I might. And I've not. It's not like I have any reason to like think that I'm going to dislike them. I just, whenever you have 100 movies to watch, it's just always pushed back because of X, Y, and Z. So with that being said, I am going to talk about a franchise that I think at this point is my number 1 franchise, and B, a movie that, depending on the day, fights for my number 1 spot. It's not my number 1 in the franchise, but there are days, especially right when the end credits go, where I'm like, this might be, and that's Rocky 3.
Nice.
You guys, at this
nice.
point, anybody who's been talking to me, like privately or whatever, in the last year or so, knows how much Rocky has just gotten up there for me in this entire franchise. Like, spoiler alert, because not many people are going to watch this video, I have a video essay that I've already written the script for and recorded the first draft on why Rocky 5 is a masterpiece. So stay tuned for that. Rocky 3, though,
Yes!
Right, exactly. But stay tuned for that. Rocky 3, though, is what we're talking about, and I love this film. 90 minutes, you know what I mean? It's short, so rewatchable, check. Action, it's got everything within the Rocky franchise, check. Clubber Lang, acting like a wild boy, check. Redemption, heartfelt moments, check. Getting together with Apollo and figuring out their both their arcs, check. You know what I mean? Having Talia Shire as Adrian, I think this is her best performance. Like, this is the peak in the franchise. The moment that she has on the beach, oh my god, dude, it gives me chills every time. She kills it in that scene. Like, there's so much about this. That's the only reason why this movie, depending on the day and depending on my mood, fights with Rocky 1 for being my favorite of the franchise. And if you guys, if it ever gets to a point where I do a revisit of some of my favorite movies, you'll see how high Rocky is for me. So I love this franchise and I love this movie, and this is one of the ones where, honestly, like me and Jen talked about in the Against the Grain podcast, I really don't think that there has any cheesy moments. Like, everything with Clubber Lang, that's his character. Like, he's an animated character, but he is who he is. Like, he's not being animated. He's just I almost said Ice-T. Mr. T, he's just out, he's just that type, that's just his personality, you know what I mean? Like, that's just so he stands out. So it's one of those where I don't think nothing about it is cheesy. Like, all the cheesy stuff in Rocky 4 that's goofy, whether you like it or not, that you can definitely admit it's cheesy. I really don't think anything in Rocky 3 is cheesy, and I love the fact that Paulie has his things that he goes through, which is in his entire arc of the entire series. Like, there's so much about this movie that is fantastic, and I love it. When you got everything with Mickey, like, there's just so much in this movie that just checks, that just really is, like, it's in the middle of the franchise, and it really, like, encapsulates everything that is the highlight of the Rocky series, and I love Rocky 3, and it is so rewatchable. So,
Yeah.
we are 2/3 of the way done. Sandy, now it is time to have some fun. We're going to talk about our most underrated thirds in franchises. And Sandy, you get to kick it off. What is a movie
hooray.
that is something that either A, genuinely is underrated in your opinion, or B, overlooked? You know, it could be based on your criteria. You might have chose it for one of those two reasons. So kind of establish which one of those it really is. Do you think it's underrated where people need to like go back and check it out, or is it overlooked where people just kind of skipped it based on X, Y, and Z? And you know, maybe Aaron has a pick that, you know, might fit the overlooked depending on who you're asking. So Sandy, go ahead and set it off. What is your most underrated?
Okay, so I'll preface by first. I think it's actually both. I think it's underrated and what was the other one you said? Overlooked. I think it's overlooked and underrated. The first one in the franchise is the one everybody talks about. It's always there. Everybody talks about it. Blah 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 blah. The next one that gets talked about the most is the second one, and then it's the third one. And I think that this movie does something spectacular that the other two didn't do. As far as I'm concerned, 1 and 2 in this franchise, even though 1 is great, 2 is almost a carbon copy, just in a different location. What I love about this is in an entire city, and they go everywhere, and this movie is my favorite of the franchise. It is Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Well,
Okay.
that's not where I thought this was going. Can I just say, with the vague description, I seriously thought The Hangover 3 was about to get brought up.
Oh, God.
I thought he was going to say Night at the Museum.
You know, you guys need to
so
watch
that's
my,
incredible. That's incredible how well that description
Everybody was saying, I was like, Night at the
The
Museum
first one's
3?
great, the second's a carbon copy, and the third one's set in a whole city. It kind of works.
Okay, I'm going to give you that one. I'm going to give you that one.
All right.
But here's the reason. Here's the reason. John McClane, big old tower, Nakatomi Plaza, goes to war, big explosions, awesome shit. We all love Die Hard. Die Hard 2, airplane terminal, you know, fat Dennis Franz is the cop and, you know, being a kind of a dick, you know, whatever. And, you know, they fight a bunch of people, but it ends on the tarmac and it's there. Die Hard with a Vengeance is awesome. Let's just say John McClane has seen better days. And he's not the John McClane we know. He's a little bit rough, ragged. He's divorced or still whatever from his family. Yet, some dude out there hates him so much still that he's going to send him on these crazy journeys all over across the city. But not alone. We now add into the franchise where he walks into a neighborhood primarily, if not completely, African American, and they make him wear a freaking sandwich board that says horrible things on it. And
You're not
to
going to
save
repeat what it
his,
says?
I am not going to repeat what it says, Medina.
Okay,
No.
all right, just checking.
And to save his life, a man named Zeus has to come out, played by awesome Samuel L. Jackson, telling him, dude, get out of here. They're coming to kill you. What are you doing? And they all get wrapped up together, and Simon, the bad guy, continues to send them to shut off bombs in the craziest
What does he say?
locations.
What does Simon say? I'm just kidding.
Simon, Baha. That's right. Simon said you didn't do the right thing, so now you got like 30 seconds left. Now, this movie is great. The interaction between John McClane and Zeus is fantastic. Neither of them like each other. You think that Bruce Willis really likes his character guy, but you know what? At the end of the day, they get the job done. They do it all over the city, blowing things up everywhere. I just love it for the fact that the captain who fired him or let him go had to give him his badge back, his detective badge back, and that was great. So I love that part. This is just, it's more fun for me than the other three are, because it's sort of like, okay, you're in a building, okay, you got to go up here and do this, and okay, you got to get rid of these guys. The sheer vastness of New York City, and like when he has to drive that cab backwards down road, he's like, get out of the way, waving his hands like, who's going to get out of the way in New York? You just clobbered a whole whackload of people. And it's all a fake. And that's the best part of the movie. It's all a fake. It's just them, Jeremy Irons, who's the best, trying to get the gold. And that's all, at the end of the day, that's all it is. Not revenge. It's all about money. And I love this movie. I absolutely love it. I think it's underrated. I also think that it's overlooked in this franchise. So that's it.
Honestly, I thought the third movie in this franchise was Speed, with Under Siege being number 2. But I mean, sometimes I just don't understand the Die Hard on a boat, Die Hard on a bus. No. Fun fact: haven't seen this one either. I've only seen Die Hard 1. Die Hard 1 is a banger. I love it. Top 100 material, but I haven't seen any other ones in the franchise. I just, once again, just haven't gotten there. And I'm not an action guy. Like I know, I told you guys, like I wasn't overselling the fact that it doesn't make sense, but I'm not an action guy. So if I love an action movie, which I do love Die Hard 1, it has elements to it that I love. So unfortunately, this is not rewatchable for me because I haven't watched it. And it's definitely overlooked by me because I haven't seen it. Aaron, what is your most underrated film in a third of a franchise? I don't think I could have said that even better. And I'm ready to see some eye rolls. Warning, spoiler alert.
Before we get into this, can you indulge me for like 10 seconds?
On which part?
Can you bring back up the Rocky 3 poster?
Sure.
Oh boy.
Can I just say, Mr. T's facial hair is the best I'm covering up herpes beard since Wes Bentley in the Hunger Games.
Yikes.
I mean, look at how high that goes. Like,
hey,
right,
the,
wow.
the 80s were a wild time. Go ahead. Speaking of the Hunger Games, what is your pick?
yeah, so
Oh, no.
I'll quickly say I did almost go with the third Hunger Games film because it is my favorite of the franchise, but I flipped it when Henry ultimatumed me. I flipped it because I'd rather sell a whole franchise that I think is overlooked. So I went with The Maze Runner, The Death Cure. This, to me, is out of this consistent spam of the 2010s of these fucking mostly shitty young adult adaptations. In my opinion, I think this franchise it's not the best, but it's the most consistent. It's the only one where I'd say in a trilogy of films, all three of them are at least solid, right? You have films like The Hunger Games, which have some great films, but also a terrible film. You have ones like Harry Potter, where I'd say most of all of them are brilliant. It's a great, right? But in terms of a lot of the more modern young adult franchises, a lot of them are like fucking Twilight or The Divergent, where they're just shit, but they make money, so they get made, or they're terrible one-off burnouts. This is the only one that got to all three films, and I would honestly recommend all three of them to anybody. I'm not going to say they're going to be your favorite film of all time, but I think the acting in them is solid enough. Considering Wes Ball was a debut director with the first one, you can see the growth in his direction over the course of the three films. It gets better directed as it goes on. And if you're someone like me who knows nothing about the books, it throws in more elements than you'd assume for an average young adult franchise. Specifically with this one, it's focusing on essentially trying to shut down a government sect that has been taking teenagers and using them as experiments in an attempt to find an invincibility cure against what is essentially a zombie apocalypse. So it's even though it's not the most original concept, it's taking different bits from different places and it's doing it solidly, and that's why it's my underrated. Like I said, if you watch this trilogy, it's not going to be the best film of all time, but it's three films that are on a range of good to really solid, like really good. And there is improvements in the acting, there is improvements in the writing, and there's improvements in the direction from a rookie director over and through each film that I think definitely does make this worth a watch.
I respect that. I will say I haven't seen any of the three because of generally everything that you said. On the inverse of like it's not for me on paper, so I haven't given it a chance. I mean, I'm not saying you completely sold me, but if I'm ever like, hey, I want to step outside the box, or shout out Against the Grain podcast, go against the grain, I would give it a chance just because of your recommendation. So I appreciate that.
So what I would say, like how I sold it to somebody, because they asked me specifically, like I complimented the director. The director who made this trilogy, his debut was the first film. He's only made these 3 films. On the strength of his direction of these 3, on the strength of his direction of these 3 films, he was Matt Reeves' personal choice to take over for the 4th entry into the Planet of the Apes franchise. That should say a lot about what filmmakers think about these films. Even, again, they're not 10 out of 10, but I'd say, like, the first one I think I gave a 6.5 to. The second one's like an 8, and I'd say this one's around a 7 or an 8. They're not perfect, but they're the only young adult trilogy where I'd say you will enjoy all 3 of these films to an extent.
All right. Well, shout out to that. If this was the Against the Grain podcast, that would be something where I'm glad you brought that up. So sometimes you slip one through the cracks, and this was it. But D, are you going to bring up something that is completely overlooked, or are you just going to go more underrated?
I don't know if anyone's going to agree with me on this one, but I'm going to preface this and kind of build up the tension. It's not Night of the Museum 3, like Sandy was alluding to. But my third one, it's a movie where the first 2 are bona fide top 100, maybe even top 10 movies, depending on who you ask. And then they had the third one. Now, the third one's not a bad movie, but because it follows the other 2 and the high quality that they were set with, it gets a lot of shit. And there's one bad part about it that I'll for sure acknowledge, but everything else, I think it's a pretty good movie other than that.
I have a very solid guess at this one, too. Tell me if I'm wrong.
It's Godfather 3.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I don't hate Godfather 3. What I do hate is I hate Sofia Coppola's performance in it. I think if you remove her, the movie's an absolutely great movie. It definitely suffers from the fact that it's not Godfather 1 and 2. Shut up, Sandy. You had your time. But what really drives this movie forward is that it is a kind of closing on Michael's story. And I do think that it does get a lot of shit because of the previous 2. Had Godfather 1 and 2 not been that good, which is like sacrilege to even say out loud, then I don't think people would even... They wouldn't call this movie that bad. Andy Garcia does an absolutely brilliant performance in it. Al Pacino has a brilliant performance in it. And Francis Ford Coppola does the best he can. I think the fact that he had to switch in after Winona Ryder, like the day before shooting, wasn't able to do it. Like that's something you put through a director, and it's not really something you want to have them go through. So I definitely don't think this movie deserves all the hate that it gets. I think Sofia Coppola's performance is definitely the worst part. But other than that, there's not a lot in the movie that I really don't enjoy. The Vatican stuff is different, but it fits within the realm of the story and within Michael's overall growth as a character. So that's what I'm going to put out there. I know I might get canceled for this one, but who cares? Fuck it. You guys have tried to cancel me like 8 times by now.
No, you know what? Someone's in your corner.
Madi, people have to know who you are to cancel you, so I mean, I'll start with that.
That's also true. I'm usually known as the token guy in most people's shows, so it's fine. Like, there's like, oh yeah, it's the non-white guy who was on Aaron's show, or the non-white guy who was on Full Metal that one time.
Literally that one time.
I have more than one non-white person on my show. Thank you very much.
All right, well, we'll see. But I mean, I understand people hating this movie, but if you bring up hate of things that weren't Sofia Coppola's performance, I feel like you're definitely just reaching. Because I feel like the rest of this movie works very well. She does not. I can't even read what that says.
Yeah, I can't.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Well, the show, like,
I just want to quickly let him know that he's not on an island. Look, Godfather 1 and 2 are 10 out of 10 material. This, and I saw these movies a few years ago, so I didn't actually score them. This to me, offhand, would be like a 6 or a 7. It's nowhere near
I
as
put it
good
at
as
a
the
7.
originals. It's nowhere near as good as the originals, and it's because of that it pales in comparison. But this to me, and this might actually get me more in trouble than you. I've said for a
Because you're
long
white.
time, I think The Dark Knight is a really, really, really good movie that is overshadowed in the best way possible by Heath Ledger's performance. People talk about it like it's an incredible 10 out of 10 movie, and the average person, when you ask them, what do you love about it? The first 5 things they're going to say are all related to Heath Ledger's performance. This movie is a similar thing. Sofia Coppola is an okay director, but she's a fucking horrendous actress. And this is one of the worst performances in probably cinematic history. I mean, for God's sakes, her death scene is laughable. You could look it up as like a comedy skit on YouTube. It's terrible. But it was kind of the best of a bad situation for Coppola, and unfortunately he got stuck with the real worst possible answer here. But I don't think a shitty, Razzie-worthy performance should overshadow a movie that at the end of the day is just fine. It's not terrible.
I mean, going back, if they did have Winona Ryder, I think this movie would have been much better appreciated.
Yeah.
Because she's actually an actress, and it's not like, oh, I had one day to prepare for this whole fucking movie. But, I mean, no, I agree. I definitely put it as like a 7 out of 10. And I've rewatched it like a couple times just to make sure that I wasn't fucking tripping the first time I watched it. And every single time I'm like, you take her out, and it's a solid movie. Al Pacino is great this is one of the like last performances
if you
he
put
gave
her on
great
mute,
before he had that whole like, yeah, if you put her on mute, it's great. But Al Pacino and Andy Garcia do such phenomenal work in this movie, and they all get overlooked because of a lot of bad acting on Sofia Coppola's part.
Speaking of overlooked, haven't seen it. We hit the trifecta with the underrated
You know what,
section
man?
for me.
You seen any of? You haven't seen any of our picks, have you?
Have
I
you
have not.
seen a movie?
Yeah, I'll beat you in trivia if I'm ever uncanceled.
That's not saying much. I get 2 points average.
Exactly. Have you seen the movie?
If I properly ran a trivia league, I'd give you a shot, but I don't, so that's not my problem.
Oh, yeah, that's what I want to hear. So with that said, we're going to close out the underrated section with my underrated, and I didn't just pick this just because it's relevant. This has become my favorite of the franchise. This is a movie that I think has the best story within the franchise. I think the direction's really good. It was just covered, ironically, on the Horror Sequels episode over at Logged It on Multiplex. And I really think that this movie is fantastic. Like, it stands out above the rest because of just the heart and the emotion that goes into it. And that's surprising from a horror film. And I am going with Saw 3. This is a movie that I think is fantastic. I love the fact of how they tie everything together with John Kramer, and right now, because I haven't rewatched it or studied it, so I don't know the characters' names, but the main guy that we're following through, his wife, who's the doctor, John Kramer, and then the girl, you know what I mean? Like, everything that going, it all comes full circle, and it just works all so well together. And I think that the horror elements, like what they talked about on the Logged It episode, the really only issue that anyone had with this is that the traps are a little more gory versus 1 and 2 are a little more ground level in that regard. So I guess if you for example, Sandy, I would understand giving your criteria on horror films if you didn't like this, and maybe you liked 1 and 2 because of how more grounded they are in the horror. I'm just saying theoretically. So I would get it, but it's one of those where as the story goes, 2, I think, is really good story-wise, but I think 3 is fantastic. I love the franchise as a whole, and if I was to put one in my top 100 that would, represent the Saw franchise, it would be 3 because of how well I connect with the story and just the emotion of how they're doing things. It's handling grief of the loss of a child. It's handling, not being there with your spouse because of the how you grieve differently. It's how you need someone who's going to help you from your cranial issues and like give you surgery, but also how that ties in together with someone who's dealing with something with the criteria of how Jigsaw goes about picking his victims. Like everything ties together so beautifully, and people could say that that's one of those things where it's like, oh, how convenient, but like that's sometimes how a good story works. Convenience, makes things tie together perfectly, and I love it for that. And the traps are creative, they're memorable. The Frozen one is crazy. I'm not going to get into specifics because of either gore issues or also just because it might be overlooked and underrated. You might not be a big fan of the Saw franchise, or you want to rewatch it. You kind of want to feel it again, like you haven't given it a second chance. But I really like the snapping one. I'll leave it at that. And then the Frozen one. It's one of those things where you have to make decisions, and the main character, he's kind of a dick going with, people, everyone within the traps and like his test, they're dealing with how they had an involvement in the loss of his son. So 9 out of 10 people, they're like, F that, I'm going to let them die. But most of the times, even though like initially he's like, yeah, F that, I'm going to let you die. But then the humanity really comes about and he's like, I'm going to try and save. And granted, he fails, it's Saw, he fails, spoiler alert, and they die, but he actually tries. Like, there's redemption to him. So in the end, when he finally has his moment that he kind of does something that is genuinely stupid, and it actually screws him over, once again, full circle, I think it's beautiful. And I love this movie, and it has so many elements to it. And it's not that long, so it could even go in the rewatchable section, you know what I mean? Like, I love this franchise as a whole, and Saw 3 is my favorite of the bunch. And I'm going to start with Aaron. I'm actually going to give you a second because I just feel like you either disagree entirely or you're just genuinely confused. What are your thoughts on this Saw, Aaron?
No, so truthfully, I have no problem with horror. I don't see it in theaters just for personal reasons. Jump scares aren't my thing. I've only seen the first Saw film, and I think it's legitimately a really great film. I purposely haven't seen any of them past it because the whole torture porn thing doesn't interest me. But I know a number of people. I have 2 cousins who make like small scale films over in Ireland and England, and they love working with horror. And they're huge fans of the Saw franchise. My confusion was just I've never heard anybody earnestly compliment the story in these films, which was the most intriguing part of your thing. Like, I've heard people say it for the first one, and I have heard a bit of praise towards it for Spiral, because it's a bit of a different approach to a Saw film. But the rest of them, all I ever hear is just, oh, gore, you're ripped. Like, I know one of them, the guy from Linkin Park, gets ripped in half, and there's, like, stunts in all sorts of these films. That's all I know. That stood out to me. Someone was like, yeah, and one of them, they rip the guy in half because they pull him by a car or something. But other than that, I've just never heard anyone earnestly praise the story, which was what caught me off guard. But it's a fair reasoning.
Yeah, I genuinely, it's like I said, it is technically the first one that starts to veer into the torture porn. Like, it technically is, but based on the story, it has good supporting, reasoning. So, if you didn't, like I started off, if you're like, nah, it's not for me, I would totally understand that. But if you're a fan of the franchise and you like, horror, more, gory stuff, I feel like this is a good point. Sandy?
Okay, as probably the only non-horror fan in the room, I'm going to say this. If you can have 9 Fast and Furious movies, 17 Rocky movies, 150 other franchises of the YA version, then you can absolutely have this many movies in a franchise. I could care less. There are people out there, Henry included, that like this stuff. Like, I love the Fast and Furious franchise. I get shit for it all the time because I love it all. I don't love just 1 or 2 movies. I can find value in all of it. So you know what? Saw 3, Henry's underrated. You know what, man? It's where we get to finally meet Tyrese, and you know what? It's a stupid
John
story,
Singleton's
but
a goat. It's fun.
John Singleton is great. So anyway, listen. If you like it, fucking like it. Don't worry about what anybody else thinks. I was not like this. I was not like this 4 years ago. Henry has been dogging on me for years to watch. Well,
There Will Be Blood.
There Will Be Blood, and I didn't want to watch it because I was like, I don't know. Yeah, and I hadn't seen it, and then I watched it, and now I've seen it like 3 or 4 times. It's a really great movie. You don't. If you don't like, am I going to watch a Saw movie? No. Based on the description, that's all I need to know about it. It is not for me. I don't want to see anybody's ears pulled off or eyeballs poked
They
through.
put
I don't
teeth
need
on
to
the
see anything.
poster.
Exactly. Like, I know that somebody's going to lose those teeth at some point in time, and I'm fine with that. If that's your thing, great. I learned my lesson about jump
That's my thing.
scares when I was tiny. We watched me and my brother watched Arachnophobia, and he was an arachnophobe, like serious, like a spider anywhere, and like he used to leave dead ones on the freaking wall to be a warning for other spiders. So when that spider comes out, I grabbed his leg and he punched me so hard that I almost broke my arm. It was horrible, but that's when I learned to let people like what they like and not force other people to not like what they like. So Henry, get on it.
That's what I'm talking about. And just since the other two talked, Medee, do you have a quick one or two thing you want to say about Saw 3 or the Saw franchise in general, and based on my description of the movie?
I remember watching Saw 1 and 2, and I've seen a couple of the others. I just don't remember the difference between the other ones. I definitely liked Saw 1 and 2, but for me, because of Saw 3, like, kind of got into more of the gore stuff, and then same with, and that's kind of how they went on from there. A lot of it just kind of blended together when I watched it, and I was just so, like, it's not my. I definitely prefer more like a psychological horror, which is what Saw 1 and 2 are. And then when it gets into gore, I'm just like, all right, you know what?
Well, that's why I was saying, like, the story elements of how it connects to everything. I really feel like, especially the ending, like the last 5 minutes of the movie, I think it's like some of the best psychological horror like ever, just because of how it really does tie together. And if you can muster getting to that point, I think the payoff is beautiful. So I feel like if a lot of people are checked out at that point, then sure, the ending didn't gravitate as well with you and you don't connect. But I genuinely believe, like Ethan mentioned it in the Logged It episode, Saws 1, 2, and 3 are like a fantastic trilogy. Like, if you stopped it there and maybe you watched Jigsaw as like a spin-off and Spiral as a spin-off, sure. Like, I like, you know, the rest of the Saw movies, but I get, like, if you just had 1 through 3 and then Jigsaw and Spiral as, like, you know, spin-offs or prequels or whatever, then that'd be perfect, you know what I mean? So I genuinely believe 3 would be a great
that tells me I
ending
should
of the
have
movie.
stopped after 3.
Yeah.
I genuinely think I should have stopped
I feel
after
like
3.
the other
looking
ones
back, I probably should have,
taints
but
3. Like, you know, 4, 5, 6. I think they taint 3. Like, especially the way Saw 3 ends, it could technically end. You know what I mean? Like, it really could end the franchise. Like, it's literally.
But they make hella money, so
you ain't lying. So,
yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, yeah.
Shit,
Yeah.
even Spiral turned a profit.
I remember parts of Saw 3. It's just like, I remember when I watched, because I watched like all of them within like a couple days of each other, just because I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna watch all the Saw movies.
That'll also do it.
So, and
you
like
can't
they all
watch
just kind
them
of like
together. They're not. It's not a bingeable franchise.
Yeah, but that was the thing. Like 1 and 2 stood out for me. I was like, 1 and 2 are really great movies. And then I watched 3, and then I just remember it was like a Wednesday I watched 3, and then Thursday I watched 4, and I was like, it's fucking like the next Monday again, and I just watched a bunch of movies. I don't even remember where one ended, where one began, right? So I think I might have to rewatch it just to kind of give you its due credit and see if I enjoy it more. But, you know, for now,
Well, that's a conversation I can't wait to have.
Before we move on, can I just ask you one more thing, just because it's on my mind? Would you say, just off what I know it was shooting for versus what it became, would you say Spiral drifts towards one of the earlier types of films, or is it just like gore porn again?
No, I would say it's generally its own thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
okay, so it's not even the same. Okay,
it's Saw 1 meets Jigsaw in terms of concept. You know what I mean? Like, it's and meets a police procedural. You know what I mean? So it's Saw 1 meets Jigsaw with a police procedural. You know, 7, like any, like I didn't want to give specifics because then it tends into spoilers of, you know, how it goes. You know what I mean? But yeah, Saw 1.
I mean, we can
plus
only
Jigsaw,
expect the head in a box and something.
Or maybe some teeth. With that said, Sandy, go ahead. You were given 5 honorable mention options. We already talked about a couple potentially that I let you talk a little more in depth. Go ahead and, you know, one or two sentence for your honorable mentions. We don't have any graphics. Sure. You know, let's leave it at that, and we'll end off pretty good.
All right. Okay. I actually have 4. I took one off my list because we talked about it already. And I switched one because we talked about the other one already. So I'm going to give Henry a little bit of a surprise here. But My first one is, of course, I wouldn't be able to call myself a Star Wars fan if I didn't put Return of the Jedi on here. It's a great movie. I even like the Ewoks, but only when they're hanging out with Chewbacca because it's great. They're picking each other's hairs and stuff. It's great. So yeah, Return of the Jedi is great. Luke Skywalker igniting the green lightsaber for the first time on Jabba's sail barge is the literal shit. When you just blink and jumps off and flips and grabs it, and the whole comes up and the fight goes. It's freaking awesome. It's a great movie. My second was not mentioned here at all, so I'm happy about it. And I think this one is also underrated. Is Back to the Future 3. Back to the Future 3 is a fun movie. It didn't have a lot of the heaviness, heavy, of the second one, which is my favorite of the franchise. Kill me later. But 3 is a lot of fun. It's a lot of good times. It's back in the Western. Doc Brown's crazy always, so it's great. Marty going by Clint Eastwood is just a throwback to the second movie, or for the first movie when he's Calvin Klein the whole movie. So I think that it's a really good installment. I'm going to go to this one, and then I'm going to go to the next one that you guys are going to hate completely. But this one is my favorite of the franchise. I don't care what anybody else says. Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, Dream Warriors is absolutely awesome. It is so cool. I love the fact that they can get into their dreams and they become the people that they're supposed to be, who they think of. One's a strong guy, one's a wizard. It's really, really kick-ass. Plus, it had the awesome Dream Warriors song from Dawkins. And when we're in the 80s, hair metal is awesome. Even when you're not in the 80s and have no hair metal rules. So rock and roll. My last pick is what is going to get me a ton of shit. I don't care what anybody says. It is my favorite of the trilogy, and it is also going to be so fun to hear you guys' reaction. But I love the Blade franchise, and Blade Trinity to me is the funnest ride I've been on out of the whole thing. And I know Medea is going to go nuts. Ryan Reynolds is great. Jessica Biel is great. Blade is great. Hunter Hearst Helmsley is great. Even the guy from I can't even remember his name who plays Dracula is great. It is a fun ride, and Ryan Reynolds, as with almost everything he does, makes that movie fun by quipping the jokes and sticking it to people where they have to stick it. So those are my honorable mentions for today. I'm not going to give you any more of the horrible ones that I love watching, but those are it. There you go. Medea, you might want to put your headphones back together again. I'm not sure.
Motherfuckers always want to ice skate uphill. Aaron, what are your honorable mentions?
All right. So I have a couple that I'll give the one or two sentences to, but 3 that I think are obvious picks. I just want to rattle off Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Toy Story 3, and War for the Planet of the Apes. Just all great films. I don't think I really need to explain those. The ones that I do want to explain, I mentioned it briefly earlier. The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1, I know it's not a popular film, but I do legitimately believe it's the best of that franchise, simply because that is a franchise where you legitimately have a number of Oscar-winning and Oscar-nominated actors, and for the most part, they're not really given any material to act with. This is the most actors-friendly film of the 4. I also think it's one of the best performances of Josh Hutcherson's career. He doesn't have a lot to say, but the facial and physical acting they get out of him and the portrayal of abuse is one of the most interesting things I've seen in a film like this. And Liam Hemsworth's not totally Deadwood, which is a compliment to him. The other ones I had were Bad Boys for Life. Bad Boys movie should never have been that good. That movie is like, the first 2 are dumb fun. This one is legitimately good, and I do hope they make a sequel. And then the 2 that Henry kind of mentioned earlier, where I had like inception of film, was James Bond 3 different times. I think the 3rd film is the best of a specific Bond. Goldfinger is the best Connery. The Spy Who Loved Me is the best Roger Moore, and Skyfall is the best Daniel Craig. And then MCU, I also want to shout out because I think their 3rd films have been consistently really good. I know a lot of people hate it. I love Iron Man 3 as someone who's not a comics fan I don't have that attachment to the Mandarin twist, and I know that's what turns a lot of people off, but I think if you remove that from it, it's an incredible character study of Tony Stark and how, truthfully, the emotions that superheroes might feel the first time they deal with a situation like what they dealt with. He went from being a normal dude that fought in the Middle East against literal military to dealing with aliens, and that would fuck with your head. But also, Civil War, Ragnarok, and Infinity War are all third films within the individual trilogies within the MCU, and I think all three of those are, if not the best, then very close to being the best of their respective series.
Nice.
All right, Madi. I shouldn't let you talk at all because how much you've badmouthed Jen and her options, but no, I'm gonna let you go ahead. Let's hear your honorable mentions.
Okay, I'm gonna try and go with honorable mentions that haven't been mentioned by anybody, which has significantly cut down my list. So I might actually get 5 and like just be happy. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is a great third entry into the film and probably one of the best westerns of all time. Lethal Weapon 3. I really love the Lethal Weapon franchise, and Lethal Weapon 3 is just it's so much fun. Right. Don't even stop. George A. Romero's Day of the Dead is arguably as good as his first. Red Dragon is technically a third entry in the kind of Hannibal Lecter storyline. Clear and Present Danger, the Harrison Ford. What the hell is the character's name? The Tom Clancy one.
It's
Jack Ryan.
Jack Ryan.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Something.
Jack Reacher. Nice.
Jack Reacher. Same guy. Who cares?
My mind went to what's his name in Air Force One. For some reason, I put those two together.
Get off my aircraft.
I was almost thinking like Gary Oldman's in that, right? Men in Black 3. That's another one that doesn't get a lot of love, but I thought was a really heartfelt entry into the franchise. 2 sucked, and then this one kind of just got overlooked because of that. And I'm only allowed 5. Fuck you.
Okay. You get one more. One more.
Okay. Let's go with Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. I really like Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
And I regret giving you one more.
What the fuck?
I'm just kidding.
Hold on. Can I just say, for all the shitting that's been done on Jen Kemp tonight, I want to compliment her very briefly. Her display last week is the best rattling of names since Ben Affleck and Matt Damon accepted an Oscar together. It was very equivalent.
They just played Boston like 30 times.
I don't know. It was hold on, Aaron. That or the scene in Ted when he's trying to guess old girl's name and he's like, "Does it end with a Lee?" Bam!
Sammy,
I got you, motherfucker. Now. All right, so I'm not
Brandy.
Exactly. All right, I'm not gonna rattle.
I love you, Jen, but you limited me to only 5, and I don't enjoy that. I don't enjoy limits.
So I'm gonna start off with the one that. Oh my god, he is a baby. So I'm gonna start off with the one that was mentioned earlier, Rise of Skywalker. I love it. You can have your Palpatine beef all you want, but I think Rise of Skywalker is fire.
I love it. Yep.
I think Force Awakens is like top tier Star Wars, and I think Rise of Skywalker is just a notch below. Like it's so great. The World's End, the Cornetto trilogy. I didn't put it in the top 3 just because it's not a technical like thematic trilogy.
Yeah.
It's one of those fake ones. Yeah, but I had to honorable mention it because I love it so much. Before Midnight, I love the Before trilogy. Sunset, Sunrise. I love, I think Sunset's my favorite of the 3, and then Sunrise is really, really good. And then Before Midnight, the climactic scene, arguably is my best of the trilogy, but as a whole, the movie is like my 3rd favorite. So it's one of those awkward moments, but I couldn't not mention it. I truly love that. You already mentioned The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, but it's one of my favorite scores of all time. It's literally that and Rocky are my 2 alarms to wake up every day. So I hear it every single day, and I don't get tired of it for a reason. And the ending is just fantastic. And yeah, I think that's it for me. So guys, we did it. We did pretty good. This was 3 and Out here on the There Will Be Movies live channel. If you guys are a part of this channel, you guys are watching this on the repeat, because unfortunately I think Joseph is the only one over here in the live chat. Shout out Joseph. But if you're watching this on the repeat, if you notice that we're not going to be publishing any other content on here, it's because my other channel, which I just renamed There Will Be Movies, and this is There'll Be Movies Live. Similar to how Full Metal did it back in the day, how they did Full Metal Media and then Full Metal Trivia. I think that's or Full Metal Live. They went through a couple names, but it's a similar premise of this channel is specifically going to be for live streaming, which is going to be 3 and Out and the Against the Grain podcast. They're going to have those two, live shows with interaction for the the audience, which generally speaking live content doesn't have the most rewatchable because they're longer episodes and they're unedited, whereas on the regular There'll Be Movies you'll see There'll Be Trivia, you'll see any other live comment that live content that I've talked about, similar or edited content that I've talked about, similar to my Rocky 5 video essay, which will be put up either this weekend or next weekend. Can't wait for you guys all to see that because, spoiler alert, it's a masterpiece. With that being said, shout out Sandy. Can't wait to see you on some more Full Metal. I know you're totally back in the swing of things. I loved your promo on your last match. And welcome back to Full Metal. Oh wait, no, those aren't my lines today. that was hilarious. I love that. Aaron,
thanks.
I know you're not fully in everything what they're doing on TMG, but I know you have your own segment After Dark, and then you're just really getting back on the groove of things. So I can't wait to see you just getting more into it, and also just in general everything that you guys are doing over there. And Madi, if you're desperate and you need somebody, you can either call any hooker or you can call Madi for your show. So with that being said,
I'm
Henry
just as good.
Maybe better. Henry Confidential, this is 3 and Out. This was Third Installments in Movie Franchises, and we are out.
Yo.
All right, this is going to load up for a second, so don't freak out.